Let's start off first by introducing yourself and the character you play.
Okay. I'm Justin Schuman, and I'm playing Bert.
And I'm Kira Lace Hawkins. I'm playing Mary Poppins.
Well, a lot of you guys are playing two of the most famous children's role. I mean, but in your own words, describe your characters, who they are, and why they are the way they are. Maybe.
Sure. Well, in the musical, it's kind of interesting because Bert serves as our narrator, which he does kind of in the original movie, but it's even more prevalent and obvious in the musical version. So I've been playing with this idea of Bert as narrator and Bert within the story, Mary Poppins. And he's just a really quirky, genuine, sincere kind of soul who, in our story at least, helps Mary Poppins in saving the Banks family. And the way that I've just tried to approach it is bringing my own weird, fun, down-to-earth, if I could be so bold as to say that I am those things, to the character and just using myself as the starting point. He's quirky and fun and weird.
Yeah, and Mary Poppins, I think, is... she's got a touch of magic about her. She obviously comes from the sky and just kind of dances in and out. I've played with, things that the audience wouldn't necessarily need to know, but does she age? Is she really just a magical creature that comes in and out when help is needed? The thing I like most about her is that even though she's a very stoic character, she has a lot of love, I think, for this family, and that's why she wants, at least my Mary Poppins, that's why she wants to help this family and see them on their way. And you kind of see that as she leaves for the last time, when she ultimately leaves the Banks and says, I wish I could stay, but I know they have to do this on their own. And so she's a very loving character.
The movie version came out in 1964, which is the 50th year of that. But yet, kids of all ages know this movie. Plus, it's Julie Andrews and Dick Van Dyke in the original roles. How does that present challenges to you? Or do you, people are, expecting Julie Andrews.
We just had this conversation in the dressing room. Kira just rewatched the movie last night just because she wanted to, I want to see it again. And I said, remind me, am I doing it right? And she was like, well, that role, for Bert at least, it was a vehicle for Dick Van Dyke. It wasn't, any actor couldn't have done that. It was for him. I have to believe it was written with him in mind. And I actually don't think I would be doing this version justice if I went out there and set myself to do Dick Van Dyke. If I didn't go out there and do me, it kind of goes back to what I said about my approach to Bert. It would come across as inauthentic or ingenuine and something very surface, and that's not what, at least, I'm striving for with this, because ostensibly it's a kid's show, it's a fun, family-friendly, but I think there's such beautiful lessons to learn and a lot of really, really poignant, things that we touch upon that if I didn't play for the truth how I feel it, it wouldn't read. So I don't feel much pressure in Dick Van Dyke being the archetype for what people think of as Bert, because my Bert's just different. And I'm not trying to compare myself, and we'll see what the audience thinks.
And along the same lines, no one can be Julie Andrews. So, I'll just push that aside. But it also helps that the musical version is quite different from the movie. Kind of different plot line, although a lot of the familiar songs still remain intact. But there are different new songs that the audience won't be familiar with. So I don't have to worry too much about completely following in her footsteps. And like Justin just said, just trying to come at it from the truth of what I believe the character is trying to do, and something of my own will definitely come out.
Well, now that you mentioned it, how is this different from the movie? What are some things people can expect to be, without giving too much away? But
yeah,
I think it's a funny question, especially without giving too much away. The songs that you know and love, Supercalifragilisticexpialidocious, Spoonful of Sugar, all of the Chim Chimneys, Feed the Birds, Jolly Holiday. You'll hear all of the songs you remember from the movie, except for I Love to Laugh, which isn't in our production. Nor was it in the original Broadway or anything. And then the songs that were written for the musical itself actually tie the piece strongly back to the book, the original book series by P.L. Travers, who did write the book. Good. Doing my own fact-checking mid-interview. It's good. So the songs that were written actually help to align our story with the original text and source material, which is super fascinating if the audience really seems to enjoy it and wants to do their own research after the fact. And so without giving anything away, you'll hear a lot of songs that are super, grounded in the original book series, and you'll meet characters that you didn't meet in the movie. And new relationships are formed, and those help to tell our story. Otherwise, it's a very familiar retelling with, I think, excellent added material.
Yeah, and I'll say if any of your audience has read the P.L. Travers books, I think that that original source material even goes farther in the dark elements and Mary Poppins is just even more so stoic and just not kind hardly ever. So. I think the musical provides this nice bridge between the Disney movie and the original books, adding in some of those darker elements.
I haven't read the book, so that's kind of interesting.
Yeah.
In the movie, at least, there's some flying, some animated characters. So how do you guys approach... I know that you've done flying before on this stage, but how do you guys approach that, the flying, and then the animated characters that were in the movie? How's that done, I guess? Or
I think Kira can speak to the flying.
Sure, so I do get to fly, but I'm the only one. Yeah. So there's some nice flight moments throughout the show.
And I think in terms of the animated characters, our costume department, Steven, and he is a one-man band with the help of the stitchers that we have. He has done an unbelievable job of translating the characters from the movie and also the original Broadway into our Wagon Wheel production. And then we also have Jen Dow, who does these incredible wigs, and the wigs themselves, with the costumes, are helping to create this colorful, seemingly like a coloring book world of characters, especially for songs like Supercalifragilistic. But in the movie, the animation's in like Jolly Holiday and such, and the musical has actually reset that number in a different. It's in a park setting as opposed to the sort of Fox races with the movie. So in sort of refocusing, there's less requirements for animated characters, but we've still paid homage, I think, with just the bright colors and the palette that the creative team in terms of costumes and hair and makeup have decided to, focus those numbers.
And I think the most important element of those specific scenes where the animation was in the movie, but now where we have statues coming to life, and like we say, just these kind of, as Scott likes to call them, avant-garde characters in Supercal. It's just that feeling of Jane and Michael, once they leave these situations, they have to wonder, did that really happen? And we have the same memories, so it probably did. And that's very reminiscent of the book as well, where they think back on what they did that day and they think, wait, did I really go through that? So the musical certainly still achieves that without the animation.
Okay. A little bit about themes. I've only seen the movie. I haven't read the book. So, are some of the themes in the movie, are they still in the musical version? And what would you say the themes are that you get out of doing this play?
Yeah, I think one major one is putting family first and tending the home before you go out and make the money. Mr. Banks, as in the movie, is very business-oriented, he wants his home to run like a corporation. And when that ultimately isn't working, he doesn't quite understand until he lets that go and lets happiness back into his life, lets the love of his children become the forefront of what he cares about. And so I see Mary Poppins' role as opening his eyes to that and reminding him of his own childhood and the things that he missed out on and how he can provide that for his kids.
I think there are like strains of Careful What You Wish For, which I know Kira has a lot of moments where that's a very strong lesson that she attempts to teach the Banks children. In the musical, Bert has a lot of moments in being the narrator where I get to come on and do these sort of just transitions where I help to highlight the lesson that may have just preceded or is about to occur in the musical. And some things that I mention are, to be just so general with it, are living in the moment, taking what you get as you get, and like dealing with that, that the winds change, the tides turn, and you can choose to sink or you can choose to swim, but regardless of that, you're going to learn something from it, and then you can employ that new information. it's a lot of like, oh, and then I think one of the biggest lessons is that anything can happen if you let it, which as I'm literally like cycling through the show, and we say that line so many times, and so I think that if like Mary Poppins had a subtitle, it would be like Mary Poppins the musical. Anything can happen if you let it, because especially with our production, I think we really emphasize that if you want something badly enough, if you wish for it, if you think of it, and if you want it hard enough, it can happen. So that's probably one of the biggest lessons.
And that leads to another great theme, I think, the empowerment of the character of Winifred Banks, who has, kind of this secondary role in the household, and whose husband, not in an unloving way, has really kind of squelched her fire, so to say. In the musical, she's actually retired. She is a former actress, which ties into the theater really well, obviously. But Mr. Banks tries to make her feel maybe not proud of that fact, and by the end, she's owning it on her own, and in the time period, that's an important lesson.
And Winifred's a bigger character, in speaking of different similarities between movies and musical. Winifred, I would argue, is a much bigger character in the musical than she is in the movie, and in the movie, she's kind of, again, 1964, you said, the idea of like women in the home was very, very specific back then. So even the way that they interpreted the role of Winifred Banks from the book to the movie is a very specific idea of what the woman in the home is. And so in the movie, she's like a suffragette who's fighting for like the women's right to vote, which we never once mentioned in the musical. And this, we focus on the relationships a lot more, which actually is not incredibly pointed in the movie, the relationship between George and Winifred. Not as much so as it is in the musical. We really get to track them from their beginning to their middle to their ultimate end in this. And it's a really nice thing that we get to watch.
Okay. Well, one of the things I've noticed and read about is how Disney princesses are big. Frozen, Maleficent, and now Mary Poppins isn't quite obviously a princess, but she's part of Disney. What is it about Disney? I'm not quite sure the musical is quite Disney. I mean, what is it about shows that Disney's have done and maybe plays and stuff that people are attracted to? Things with the Disney tie, I guess, too. And I mean, like I said, princesses seem to be big right now.
It's a big question. I do think that there are quite a few female characters in Disney, and you can argue how healthy they all are. But that little girls like to look up to and emulate, and so I think that's something.
I think in terms of the aspect of the question of people's attraction to Disney material, period, is a lot of it for me is the music. I think you'd be hard-pressed to find a Disney movie or a Disney creation that didn't feature some of the most memorable tunes that are just in the public consciousness worldwide. If you walk down the street and sing A Whole New World, 5 other people know the lyrics in your immediate vicinity. If you ever sang Be Our Guest, chances are somebody in China knows the exact same song in a different language. So I think a common theme through all of Disney material, regardless of princesses or Mary Poppins or anything, is the music and how that speaks to people in a really incredibly universal language. In terms of the princesses thing, I don't know. I just think it's like a really interesting... They've been around forever, and we've gone from like Aurora and Snow White to Anna and Elsa, Frozen, and I think if you look at the evolution of what Disney has changed their women characters into being, or lack thereof of any evolution, it's just interesting. But I think little girls like to emulate princesses, and that's the aspect of the princess movies that our people are attracted to.
Okay.